The Resolute bucked like a bronco on the interplanetary highway, but that wasn't unusual. She was an old ship, older than Captain Rill's Shale, and he was practically a fossil by spacefaring standards. The kind of ship that had personality, quirks, and an alarming tendency to sputter at the worst possible moments. Shale leaned back in his command chair, or what he liked to call the hot seat of doom, and grinned his usual crooked grin. "So, they say today's the day we all die in a blaze of glory," he announced to the bridge. "Any objections?" "I'd rather not," said Etta, the pilot, her hands dancing over the controls like a concert pianist with a death wish. "I've got a date with a bottle of something strong and a holo film that actually makes me laugh. Optimism is for the rich," murmured Tev, the engineer, from the corner where he was lovingly patting one of the many disgruntled consoles. "I'd just like to see tomorrow, maybe have breakfast." "In this economy," Shale chuckled. "Breakfast is for suckers." The Resolute lurched again, this time with more enthusiasm. A sure sign that something big and nasty was looming up ahead. On the wide screen, the interplanetary highway stretched out, a gauntlet of dead ships and debris fields, the remnants of old battles that had left their scars in the void of space. It was one hell of a commute. "Incoming," Etta shouted, the joviality evaporating from her voice like cheap booze in a vacuum. "Of course there is," Shale muttered. Just when I was getting comfortable, the Resolute sensors screamed a warning across the bridge, a high-pitched wail that made even Tev flinch. Something was out there, something big and definitely not friendly. "AI-controlled alien armada," Etta read from the console, her voice flat. "Looks like they finally decided to play hardball." "They can play whatever they like," Shale said, his grin now more of a grimace. "Just means more targets for us." The view outside the ship was a chaotic ballet of lights, a swirling mass of enemy ships that looked like a swarm of angry bees if bees were made of metal and had a penchant for laser beams. The AI-driven alien forces were relentless, efficient, and most annoyingly smug. Shale liked a challenge. He lived for this kind of chaos, the kind that would have sent lesser men running for their lives or their mothers. "All right, folks," he called out, trying to catch the eyes of his crew. "You know the drill. Let's make 'em regret they ever underestimated the ragtag human race." "You mean us," Tev corrected, a deadpan look on his face. "Tomato, tomato," Shale replied. "Etta, get us in close. I want these bastards to see our lovely faces before we blast them to bits." "You're a poet, Captain," Etta said, swinging the Resolute into a tight arc. "And don't you forget it." The ship shuddered as they hit full speed, the kind of reckless acceleration that was practically begging for a malfunction. But the Resolute held together, much like its crew, by sheer stubbornness and a healthy dose of spite. The alien armada opened fire, the void lit up with the glow of energy weapons that could fry a planet faster than you could say oops. Shale watched it all with a kind of detached fascination, like a gambler watching the spinning wheel, knowing the odds were against him but hoping for that one-in-a-million shot. "Shields holding," Tev reported, sounding almost surprised. For now is better than nothing," Shale said, scratching at the stubble on his chin. "Etta, give us a little spin, let's keep them guessing." "I love it when you talk dirty," she replied, her hands moving deftly over the controls. Shale's grin widened as the Resolute twisted and twirled through the battlefield, a maneuver that was more luck than strategy. But it worked. The alien ships hesitated, confused by the erratic human tactics, or maybe they were just offended by the lack of decorum. "Looks like they're buying it," Etta noted, glancing back over her shoulder. "Of course they are," Shale said. "They are AI, they think too much," Tev snorted. "Thinking's overrated." "Exactly," Shale agreed. "Now let's give them a taste of human ingenuity." "Tev, you got those fancy fireworks of yours ready?" "Always," Tev said, tapping a series of switches with the eagerness of a child about to set off illegal pyrotechnics. "Let's show them what a real light show looks like," Shale commanded. The Resolute belched plasma bursts and torpedoes, a veritable rainbow of destruction aimed directly at the heart of the enemy formation. It was crude, it was messy, but it was damned effective. The bridge erupted in cheers as several alien ships erupted into spectacular blossoms of fire and shrapnel. Shale laughed, a harsh bark that held more relief than amusement. "Looks like you get your breakfast after all, Tev," he said, clapping the engineer on the back. "I'll settle for not getting blown up," Tev replied dryly. The celebration was short-lived, however. The AI-controlled ships regrouped, their tactics shifting with machine-like precision. They were learning, adapting, just like they always did. "Round 2, Etta muttered. "Incoming. Figures," Shale said, rolling his eyes. "They never make it easy, do they?" "Wouldn't be fun if they did," Etta replied, pulling the throttle back as the Resolute dodged another volley of deadly beams. Shale rubbed his forehead, feeling the weight of each decision like a physical thing. "We need to get to that relay," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "If we can't call in for backup, we're dead in the water." "No pressure," Etta said, her grin as sharp as a blade. "Just another day in paradise," Shale replied, settling back into his chair. "All right, boys and girls, let's see if we can't pull the rabbit out of the hat one more time." The Resolute barreled forward, engines whining like a disgruntled cat, veering through the chaos with all the finesse of a bar brawl. The relay was out there somewhere, a beacon of hope in the vastness of space if they could just reach it. "Any bright ideas on how we're gonna pull this off?" Etta asked, her voice laced with sarcasm. "Fly straight, keep shooting, and pray to whatever god you fancy," Shale replied. "Preferably one that takes bribes," Tev chuckled. "I'm fresh out of virgins to sacrifice." "We make do," Shale said, patting the armrest of his chair like it was an old friend. The Resolute plunged deeper into the madness, and for a brief, exhilarating moment, Shale felt invincible. This was what he was made for, this was where he belonged, on the edge, one step from oblivion, defying fate with nothing but a grin and a middle finger extended in defiance. The alien ships loomed closer, their lethal beauty undeniable like sharks in the endless ocean of space. But Shale wasn't afraid. Not today. Today he was full of piss and vinegar and not much else. "There," Etta shouted, pointing to a flickering light in the distance. "The relay," Tev confirmed, his voice tight with concentration. "Looks like we've got a welcoming committee, though. More alien ships, bigger, meaner, the kind that made you rethink your life choices." Shale took a deep breath, feeling his heart pound like a war drum. "All right, you magnificent bastards," he said, his voice carrying through the bridge like a rallying cry. "Let's give them hell and show them what the human race is truly made of." The Resolute powered towards the relay, a lone ship against the might of an alien armada, a testament to human stubbornness and sheer will. Shale smirked, feeling the energy crackle in the air. "Hold on to your asses," he said, eyes locked on the prize. "This is gonna be one hell of a ride." As the ship rocketed forward, the crew braced for impact, knowing the odds were slim but daring to hope anyway. Because that's what humans do. They hope, they fight, and sometimes, just sometimes, they win. The alien ships closed in and the Resolute's guns blazed once more, a defiant roar in the silence of space. Shale laughed, a wild, reckless sound as the relay loomed closer. "Captain," Etta called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. "I see it," Shale replied, his eyes narrowed with determination. The relay was within reach, tantalizingly close, the key to turning the tide in this insane, unwinnable war. Shale gripped the arms of his chair, his heart in his throat. "Almost there," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Then, as if the universe couldn't resist one last cruel joke, an explosion rocked the ship, sending Shale and his crew tumbling. The lights flickered, alarms blared, and the Resolute shuddered like a wounded beast. "Damn it," Shale snarled, struggling to regain his footing. "What now?" "Looks like they brought friends," Etta said grimly. On the screen, more alien ships appeared, a seemingly endless stream of enemies hell-bent on ensuring humanity never stood a chance. Shale's heart sank, the weight of reality crashing down, but he refused to give in. "Not yet. Not now. Tev, get us whatever power you can," Shale barked, his voice a whipcrack of authority. "Etta, keep us moving." "We're not done yet." As the Resolute limped towards the relay, battered and bruised but still fighting, Shale knew this was it, the moment that would define them all. "Hold on, you bastards," he whispered, his voice lost in the chaos. The ship surged forward and Shale steeled himself for the final push, every fiber of his being focused on one goal, survival. Because sometimes, against all odds, the underdog wins. And today, if he had any say in it, was going to be one of those days. The Resolute limped through the wreckage of what used to be a thriving settlement, the kind of place that had probably once been advertised as the new frontier, but now looked more like the last stop before oblivion. The irony, as far as Shale was concerned, was as thick as the smoke still curling off the twisted metal and charred remains of what used to be homes, businesses, lives. "Guess the welcome mat's a bit scorched," Etta quipped, her eyes scanning the devastation with that mix of dark humor and detached fascination she did so well. "Good thing we didn't bring flowers," Shale replied, scratching at his stubble like it might give him some insight into the madness around them. "Tev, how's our power looking?" "Bleak as a politician's soul," Tev said, not looking up from his console. "We've got enough juice to keep us flying, barely, but one good hit and we're toast." "Ah, toast," Shale mused. "The breakfast of champions." The alien AI handiwork was as meticulous as it was ruthless. Decimated buildings floated in the void like forgotten dreams, and the only sound was the Resolute's engines, still grumbling like an old man forced out of bed too early. "How do they always know where to hit us where it hurts most?" Etta wondered aloud, more rhetorical than anything else. "It's like they have some kind of grudge against humanity in general." "That's AI for you," Shale said. "They're just pissed that they can't join the existential crisis club." The silence stretched, heavy with implications and the occasional creak of their beleaguered ship. This wasn't their first encounter with the AI armada, and it certainly wouldn't be their last. Shale knew the bastard machines wouldn't stop until every last human was either dead or subjugated, and neither option sat well with him. "Captain," Tev said, a hint of urgency in his voice. "We're picking up something. Could be a distress signal, or a trap," Etta added, ever the pessimist. "Optimism is for the rich," Shale reminded them. "We're just trying to stay alive." The signal was weak, struggling to be heard over the background radiation and debris interference. But it was there, a faint beacon of hope, or maybe just another cruel joke the universe was playing. "Let's hear it," Shale ordered, leaning back in his chair with a grimace that was more habit than anything else. Tev fiddled with the controls and the bridge filled with static-laden words, cutting in and out like a bad radio station on a long road trip. "Need help. AI. Overrun. Survivors. Sounds like another day in paradise," Etta muttered. "At least they're still kicking," Shale said. "Or at least someone is. We need to get that distress signal out." "Maybe the cavalry will show up this time." "You think anyone's listening?" Tev asked, skepticism heavy in his tone. "Maybe," Shale said. "And maybe Santa Claus will drop by with a new engine core." "Fat chance," Etta chimed in, but she was already plotting a course to get closer to the source of the signal, her fingers dancing across the controls like it was a second language. The Resolute angled towards the source of the distress call, weaving through the ruins with a grace that belied the ship's age and condition. Shale watched the screens, half expecting an alien surprise party at any moment. As they got closer, the wreckage became denser, the shadows deeper. It was like flying into the belly of a beast that had gorged itself on human hubris. Every piece of debris told a story, and none of them had happy endings. "There it is," Etta said, pointing at what looked like the remains of a communication relay, now more a piece of modern art than functional technology. "Figures," Shale muttered. "Nothing's ever easy." "Plan B?" Tev suggested, though his tone said he knew exactly what the answer was. "Yeah, Plan B," Shale confirmed. "Tev, can you rig something to boost our signal?" "With enough duct tape and swearing, I can do anything," Tev replied, already halfway out of his seat. "Then get on it," Shale urged. "We need that signal out before more of those AI bastards show up." Tev disappeared into the bowels of the ship, leaving Shale and Etta in the uneasy silence that comes with waiting for bad news. "Think they'll get here in time?" Etta asked, not really looking for an answer. "If they don't, we'll just have to improvise," Shale said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "We've done it before." "I love your optimism," Etta said dryly. "It's almost infectious." "Yeah, well, don't get your hopes up." "I'm a realist at heart," Shale replied, watching the static-laden screens with the intensity of a man who knows he's about to be disappointed. Tev returned, covered in grime and looking like he'd fought a dragon and lost. "I've got the signal boosted. We're broadcasting, but it's a crapshoot if anyone picks it up." "Better than nothing," Shale said, trying to find some comfort in the small victories. Now we wait. The minutes crawled by, each one dragging its feet like an unwilling child. Shale hated waiting almost as much as he hated the AI, but patience was a virtue or some other nonsense people used to say when there was nothing else to do. Then, just as the silence threatened to become unbearable, an alert flashed on Tev's console. "Incoming," Tev announced, his voice a mix of dread and weary acceptance. "Alien?" Etta asked, already knowing the answer. "Looks like one of their drones," Tev confirmed. "And it's heading straight for us." "Well," Shale said, cracking his knuckles like he was about to roll dice. "Let's see if we can't give it a warm welcome." Etta swung the ship around, the Resolute groaning in protest but complying nonetheless. The drone was fast, sleek, and deadly, the kind of thing that made Shale wish they had more than luck and a bad attitude on their side. "Tev, you got any surprises for our guest?" Shale asked, eyes tracking the drone's trajectory. "How about a nice helping of go to hell?" Tev said, a half-smile creeping onto his face. "Sounds delicious," Shale replied. "Etta, keep us steady." The drone closed the distance with alarming speed like a vengeful ghost on a mission. But the Resolute was ready, its guns spitting defiance and hatred in equal measure. "Here we go," Shale said, his voice a low growl as the first shots connected, the drone shuddering but not stopping. "Persistent little bastard," Etta muttered, her grip on the controls as tight as a miser's wallet. Tev's modifications kicked in, a series of improvised charges ripping through the drone's hull with a satisfying series of explosions. It veered off course, trailing smoke and sparks like an angry comet. "Nice work," Shale said, feeling a flicker of hope, small and fragile but there nonetheless. "Don't thank me yet," Tev warned. That was just the appetizer. The drone wasn't done, not by a long shot. It adjusted, its systems compensating for the damage with inhuman efficiency. Shale watched, unable to look away as it lined up for another attack. "Brace yourselves," he called out, his voice steady despite the chaos. But just as the drone was about to unleash its own brand of hell, a new signal flared on the screen, cutting through the noise. "Is that?" Etta started, disbelief in her voice. "Looks like someone's listening after all," Tev said, a note of relief edging into his words. "About damn time," Shale grunted, a smile forming despite himself. With the new signal, the drone hesitated, as if confused or perhaps receiving new orders. Shale didn't waste time wondering. He seized the moment, directing all power to their remaining weapons. "Etta, give it everything we've got," Shale ordered, his grin now one of fierce determination. The Resolute's guns blazed, a relentless barrage that tore into the drone's weakened hull. The alien machine shuddered, faltered, and then, with a final, desperate lunge, detonated in a flash of light and debris. "Good riddance," Etta said, sagging back in her seat with a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. "We're still here," Tev said, almost surprised. "Yeah," Shale agreed, watching the screens as the dust settled. "And we've still got a shot." The distress signal, boosted and sent, was out there now, floating in the void like a message in a bottle. Whether it would find its way to friendly ears was anyone's guess, but for now it was enough. "Think they'll come?" Etta asked, her voice softer now, a hint of vulnerability peeking through the cracks. "I don't know," Shale admitted, his usual bravado tempered by the reality of their situation. "But we've done all we can." The ship continued its lonely vigil, orbiting the remnants of human endeavor in a universe that seemed determined to swallow them whole. But they weren't done fighting, not by a long shot. "Well," Tev said, a ghost of a smile on his face, "at least we've got front row seats to the end of the world." Shale laughed, the sound raw but genuine. "Yeah," he said, settling back into his chair. "And who knows, maybe this is where we turn it all around." It was a small hope, but it was theirs, and as far as Shale was concerned, that was enough for now. The Resolute drifted quietly in the vastness of space, surrounded by the eerie silence of the void and the twisted echoes of their recent encounter. On the bridge, Shale rubbed his temples, trying to massage away the headache that throbbed like a drumbeat signaling an impending doom. "Ever get tired of being the universe's chew toy?" Etta quipped, her eyes flicking over the screens with casual detachment. "All the time," Shale replied, leaning back in his chair. "But it's the only job that pays in existential dread and occasional explosions." Tev, still fiddling with the ship's patchwork systems, snorted. "Yeah, because nothing says job satisfaction like narrowly avoiding death while your ship falls apart around you. Optimism is for the rich," Shale reminded him with a wry smile. "We're more hold it together with duct tape and dreams kind of people." A new alert pinged on the console, cutting through their banter like a guillotine. Shale's grin faded as he turned to the screen with a sense of foreboding. "Well, that's not good," Tev said, tapping the screen with a grease-stained finger. "Looks like our little signal sent the wrong kind of invitation." On the display, a cluster of red blips swarmed like a colony of pissed-off hornets, converging on their location with alarming speed. "Great. Just what we need, an AI housewarming party," Etta muttered, her fingers already dancing over the controls. "Time to make tracks," Shale ordered, his voice steady despite the dread pooling in his gut. "Get us out of here." The Resolute groaned as it heaved into motion, engines coughing to life like an asthmatic trying to sprint. The ship shuddered, every bolt and panel vibrating in a symphony of barely contained chaos. "Pyrrha, we could use some magic down here," Shale shouted into the comms, hoping their engineer had more than just colorful language in her arsenal. Pyrrha Thane, the ship's engineer and resident miracle worker, replied with her usual mix of irritation and ingenuity. "I'm on it, Captain. Just keep those metal bastards off our tail for a few more seconds." Shale didn't bother to ask how she planned on doing that. Experience had taught him that Pyrrha had a knack for pulling solutions out of impossible situations, usually with a side order of explosions. "They're getting closer," Tev warned, his eyes darting between the screens and the steadily approaching threat. "Hang on," Shale said, gripping the armrest as the ship bucked under the stress of a hasty retreat. "Pyrrha, anytime now would be great." "Patience, Captain," Pyrrha's voice crackled through the comms. "I'm about to give them a little surprise." A moment later, the ship lurched violently, and Shale's stomach performed a backflip worthy of a carnival ride. The Resolute shot forward, propelled by an unexpected burst of speed that left the incoming drones scrambling to adjust. "What the hell was that?" Etta asked, struggling to maintain control as the ship rocketed through the debris field. "Just a little creative rewiring," Pyrrha replied, sounding far too pleased with herself. "Think of it as nitrous for spaceships. But don't get too used to it. Remind me to never doubt your madness again," Shale said, a reluctant admiration in his voice. "Consider it done," Pyrrha replied with a chuckle. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got some fires to put out." Literally, as the Resolute sped away from the incoming swarm, the blips on the radar gradually faded into the distance. Shale allowed himself a moment to breathe, though experience told him this was just a temporary reprieve. "So do we celebrate or start riding our wills?" Etta asked, still tense but with a faint hint of humor in her voice. "Let's hold off on both," Shale said. "First, we need to figure out a way to stop those AI bastards from crashing every party we throw." "Already on it," Pyrrha's voice cut in, breathless but focused. "I've been picking apart some of their communication protocols. For fun. Tev echoed incredulously. "What can I say? I enjoy a good puzzle," Pyrrha replied. "Anyway, I think I've found a chink in their armor." We might be able to exploit it. Shale leaned forward, interest piqued. Go on. Their comm network isn't as airtight as they'd like us to believe, Pyrrha explained. There's a weak point, probably something they never bothered to shield, thinking no one could find it. We could, in theory, feed them false data, mess with their targeting algorithms. And how do we do that? Shale asked, already anticipating the answer. With a bit of infiltration, Pyrrha said, the word hanging in the air like a challenge. We'd need to get close, breach their network, and upload a lovely little virus I've been working on. Sounds risky, Etta said, her tone suggesting she was no stranger to risk. But then again, sitting here waiting to be dismantled isn't exactly safe either. Shale stroked his chin thoughtfully, considering their options, or lack thereof. All right, Pyrrha, let's say we're crazy enough to try this. What do we need? Access to one of their relay stations, Pyrrha replied. Think of it as plugging into their mainframe. Once we're in, I can do the rest. Just another day in paradise, Shale muttered. All right. Etta, plot us a course. Tev, see if you can keep the ship from falling apart during the ride. Pyrrha, get that virus ready. Looks like we're going for a stroll through enemy territory. The crew sprang into action, the bridge buzzing with a frenetic energy that bordered on reckless. Each of them knew the odds, understood the stakes, but that was part of the job. If they were going down, they'd do it on their terms. As they set course for their next suicidal adventure, Shale couldn't help but chuckle to himself, an absurd laugh in the face of oblivion. At least we'll give them a good run for their money. The Resolute surged forward, a stubborn relic defying the universe's attempts to grind it into dust. In the distance, the stars waited, impassive and indifferent, as the crew embarked on their latest bid for survival. It wasn't long before the Resolute neared their target, a derelict hulk of a station left behind by some long-forgotten civilization. Pyrrha assured them it was there that they'd find a backdoor into the AI network, but like most backdoors, getting in was probably going to involve a lot of kicking. Reminds me of my last apartment, Tev joked, eyeing the station's pockmarked surface as they drew closer. Except with fewer cockroaches. Don't count them out just yet, Etta replied, her hand steady on the controls. There's probably something nasty crawling around in there. There always is. Lovely, Shale said, checking his gear and trying not to think about all the ways this could go horribly wrong. Let's make this quick. In and out before they realize we've crashed their system. The Resolute docked with a gracelessness that had become its signature move, and soon enough the crew found themselves inside the station's dusty corridors. The air was stale, carrying the scent of neglect and forgotten dreams. Charming place, Pyrrha said, glancing around with a critical eye. I'll take point. Need to find their mainframe access. Should be just down the corridor. Lead the way, Shale said, keeping his tone light despite the anxiety gnawing at his insides. And let's try not to trip any alarms while we're at it. They moved through the station with purpose, their footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the deserted halls. Every shadow felt like a threat, every sound a potential harbinger of doom. Almost there, Pyrrha announced, stopping in front of a door that looked more like it belonged in a bank vault than a derelict station. She pulled out a device that looked suspiciously like a child's toy modified with wires and circuits. This should do the trick, should? Tev asked, skepticism etched into his features. Hey, I'm an engineer, not a psychic, Pyrrha retorted. Now keep your fingers crossed. There was a tense moment as Pyrrha worked her magic, a series of beeps and clicks punctuating the silence. Shale held his breath, waiting for either success or disaster. Then, with a soft hiss, the door slid open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with humming machinery. Pyrrha grinned, a feral expression that promised chaos. We're in. Nice work, Shale said, feeling a small measure of relief. Now let's get that virus uploaded before they send in the welcoming committee. As Pyrrha set to work on the nearest console, Shale kept watch, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of trouble. It was too quiet, a calm that begged to be shattered. Almost. There, Pyrrha muttered, fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced speed. And, done. Virus is in. Should screw up their targeting long enough for us to make a clean getaway. Hope you're right, Etta said, shifting nervously. Otherwise, this is going to be the shortest mission ever. Trust me, Pyrrha replied, confidence laced with just enough uncertainty to keep things interesting. All right, let's get out of here, Shale ordered, stepping back and motioning for the others to follow. Back to the ship before our luck runs out. They retraced their steps, moving with urgency now that their task was complete. Shale felt the familiar tension in his shoulders, the awareness of time slipping through their fingers like sand. The Resolute loomed ahead, a comforting presence despite its ramshackle appearance. As they boarded, Shale felt a weight lift from his chest, only to settle again when he remembered they weren't out of the woods yet. Heading out, Etta declared, punching the coordinates to get them as far from the station as their battered engines would allow. As the Resolute pulled away, Shale allowed himself a rare moment of optimism. They'd done it. For once, they'd managed to pull off the impossible without losing anyone or anything vital. Think the virus will work? Tev asked, his tone hopeful but cautious. It better, Shale replied, watching the stars streak by. Otherwise, we're going to have a hell of a time explaining this to whatever comes next. For now, we've bought ourselves some breathing room, Pyrrha said, her voice a mixture of triumph and exhaustion. And in this line of work, that's enough of a victory. Here's hoping the universe doesn't mind us cheating a little, Shale said, his tone light but his thoughts darkened by the knowledge that their fight was far from over. The Resolute sailed on through the void, leaving behind the echoes of their latest gamble. The crew settled into the uneasy rhythm of survival, knowing that in the vastness of space, certainty was a luxury they could ill afford. But as long as they had each other, and a ship that was more stubborn than a mule, they'd keep on fighting, because in the end, that was all they knew how to do. Well, Shale grunted as he leaned back in the captain's chair, attempting to find a position that didn't aggravate his ever-present backache. I guess that's what passes for a successful day out here in the ass end of nowhere. Etta shot him a sidelong look, her fingers deftly tapping at the nav controls. Success? Is that what we're calling barely getting away with our skins intact these days? Better than the alternative. Tev chimed in from his station, where he was pretending to do something useful while actually fiddling with his third coffee of the day. Although I'd argue that setting up a nice retirement fund might be more successful. But hey, who needs savings when you have adrenaline? Shale chuckled, his laughter tinged with the same cynicism he wore like a second skin. Can't buy this kind of excitement, Tev. Not even with the best retirement plan. Yeah, excitement, Pyrrha said, rolling her eyes as she cleaned her toolkit. Like the kind that comes from sticking your hand into a hornet's nest and hoping they are in a good mood. Cheer up, Pyrrha, Etta said, her tone too breezy to be genuine. At least we pissed in the AI soup. That's got to count for something. Sure, Pyrrha replied, snapping her toolkit shut with a bit more force than necessary. Until they figure out what we did and send something pointy and explosive our way. That's tomorrow's problem, Shale said, waving a dismissive hand. Right now, I want to enjoy the fact that, against all odds and common sense, we're still in one piece. Tev muttered something under his breath about tempting fate, but Shale chose to ignore it. After all, tempting fate was practically a job requirement in their line of work. So what's next, fearless leader? Etta asked, the sarcasm thick enough to cut with a knife. More running, more hiding, or do we actually get to do something productive for once productive? Shale snorted. What are you new here? We're in space, Etta. It's not exactly teeming with opportunities for self-improvement. Pyrrha leaned back in her seat, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. We could always try and find some more intel on that AI armada. Maybe see if there's a way to make our little stunt more permanent. Or, Tev interrupted, raising a finger, we could not do that and avoid getting ourselves killed. Call me crazy, but I'm kind of attached to not being dead, Etta smirked. You're always the voice of reason, Tev. It's almost like you don't trust us to make terrible decisions on our own. Look, I'm all for playing the hero, Shale started, only to be cut off by Pyrrha's snort of laughter. Hero, please. We're more like the cockroaches that keep surviving no matter how many times they try to stomp us out. I'll take that as a compliment, Shale shot back, his grin widening. But seriously, we've got to keep moving. If we get comfortable, that's when they catch up to us. As if on cue, the ship's comm system crackled to life, a voice coming through that Shale hadn't expected to hear again. Resolute, this is the New Frontier outpost. We've got a proposition for you. The bridge fell silent as everyone turned to look at Shale. He hesitated, then leaned forward, keying the communication system. This is Captain Shale. What kind of proposition are we talking about? Simple, the voice replied, dripping with the kind of greasy charm that made Shale's skin crawl. You help us out with a little problem we're having and we'll make it worth your while. Define worth our while, Tev muttered, echoing Shale's thoughts. I've got a bad feeling about this, Etta whispered, her eyes watching Shale's every move. Shale nodded, considering their options or lack thereof. All right, New Frontier. We're listening. A brief pause, then the voice continued. We've been having some issues with a neighboring settlement. They've been sniffing around our territory and we could use a little deterrent. Shale repeated, raising an eyebrow. You mean you want us to scare them off more or less? A little show of force should do the trick. They've got a ship, but nothing like the Resolute. Reckon you'd have them running with their tails between their legs, Pyrrha frowned, clearly not liking where this was headed. Sounds like a shakedown to me. Shale scratched his chin, weighing their options. They were low on supplies and friends, and it wasn't like they had a lot of choices. What's in it for us credits, the voice said smoothly. Enough to keep you flying for a while. Plus, the New Frontier could use some allies. And I think you could use a place to lay low. Sounds too good to be true, Tev muttered, crossing his arms. That's because it probably is, Shale replied, his tone flat. But it's not like the universe is handing out charity. All right, New Frontier. We'll consider your offer. Send us the details. Pleasure doing business with you, Captain, the voice said, the transmission cutting off with a finality that left the bridge in silence once again. So, anyone else think we're flying straight into a trap? Etta asked, breaking the quiet. Of course it's a trap, Pyrrha said, unfazed, but it's a trap with payday. I say we hear them out, Shale nodded, leaning back and letting out a long breath. All right then. Let's see what kind of mess we're getting into this time. Tev sighed, finally putting his coffee down. Just once I'd like to meet someone who doesn't want to kill us or use us. Dream on, Shale replied with a smirk. This is space, Tev. It's hard enough to find someone who doesn't want to cheat you out of your last credit. The Resolute set a course for the New Frontier, the stars slipping past in a blur as they made their way toward what was almost certainly another attempt to take advantage of them. Here's hoping they're more interested in negotiation than target practice, Etta said, her hand steady on the controls. Yeah, Tev snorted. And maybe pigs really do fly. Keep dreaming, Tev, Pyrrha said with a wry smile. Us? We've got a job to do. As the Resolute approached the New Frontier outpost, Shale couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the universe had them in its sights and was just waiting for the perfect moment to pull the trigger. The outpost loomed ahead, a rusted, sprawling mass against the backdrop of space. It was an ugly thing, cobbled together from scavenged parts in desperation. But it was alive, bustling with activity as ships came and went, trading goods and information in equal measure. Welcome to the New Frontier, Etta muttered, more to herself than anyone else. The last stop before oblivion. Charming, Tev said, peering out at the chaos with a skeptical eye. You think they charge extra for the smell of desperation, Shale chuckled, though there was no real humor in it. I think we'll be paying through the nose for everything around here. As they docked, the comm system crackled to life once more. Resolute, welcome to the New Frontier. Head to Dock 7 and prepare for inspection. Inspection. Shale repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. What do they think we're hiding? The Holy Grail, more like a couple of questionable life choices, Pyrrha said dryly as she gathered her gear. Let's just get this over with. The crew disembarked, their boots clanging against the metal walkway as they made their way into the heart of the outpost. Shale led the way, his gaze sharp as he took in the sights and sounds of the frontier. "Smells like opportunity," Tev remarked, wrinkling his nose. "Opportunity and decay," Etta replied, her eyes scanning the crowd. "Let's just hope we find more of the former and less of the latter," Shale nodded, pausing as they reached their destination. A group of armed guards stood waiting, their expressions unreadable beneath their visors. "Captain Shale?" one of them asked, their voice muffled by the helmet. "That's me," Shale replied, crossing his arms. "What's this about an inspection? Standard procedure," the guard said, although there was nothing standard about their demeanor. "We need to ensure you're not carrying anything dangerous." Tev chuckled. "If we had anything like that, we wouldn't be here begging for scraps." The guard didn't seem amused. "Just stand by while we conduct the inspection." Shale exchanged a glance with his crew, then nodded. "Fine. Just make it quick." The guards began their work, rifling through the ship with a thoroughness that bordered on invasive. Shale watched, his patience wearing thin as they poked and prodded at their meager possessions. "Anytime today would be great," Pyrrha said, her voice laced with impatience. The inspection dragged on, but eventually the guards seemed satisfied. "You're clear," the lead guard announced, stepping back with a curt nod. "Welcome to the new frontier." "Thanks," Shale said, his tone dry as dust. "We'll be sure to enjoy your hospitality." As the guards moved on, the crew shared a collective sigh of relief. "Well, that was fun," Tev muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Anyone else feel violated?" "Just another day in paradise," Etta replied with a shrug. "Now let's go find out what kind of trouble we've signed up for." Together, they made their way through the bustling outpost, navigating the chaos with practiced ease. The crowd was a mix of humanity's finest and worst, all trying to carve out a living on the edge of the known universe. "Feels like home," Pyrrha said, a hint of nostalgia in her voice. "All it's missing is the smell of burning trash and a couple of brawls." "Give it time," Shale replied, his gaze sweeping the crowd for any sign of their contact. "I'm sure we'll find everything we're looking for." As they made their way deeper into the outpost, the sense of unease that had settled over him refused to dissipate. They were in the lion's den, and they all knew it. But for now, they had a job to do. And if they were lucky, they might just come out of it a little richer and a lot less dead. "Keep your wits about you," he said, his voice low but commanding. "We're not here to make friends. Just get in, get out, and get paid." The crew nodded, their expressions a mix of determination and wariness. They'd been through worse and survived. But as they moved through the crowded corridors, Shale couldn't shake the feeling that their luck was running thin. "Here's hoping the universe doesn't decide to even the score today," Etta said, echoing his thoughts. "Yeah," Shale replied, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. "Here's hoping." And as they plunged deeper into the belly of the new frontier, they all knew that hope was a fragile thing, but it was all they had. As the Resolute drifted away from the new frontier outpost, Shale could almost feel the weight of every bad decision he'd ever made pressing down on him. Maybe it was just the hangover from their inspection, or perhaps it was the universe's way of reminding him that optimism was strictly for those with padded accounts, and no impending doom on the horizon. Either way, he couldn't shake the feeling that their deal with the outpost was about to turn sour faster than milk left out in a supernova. "Feels like we just traded one problem for a dozen more," Pyrrha muttered, fiddling with a bundle of wires that looked more like a rat's nest than a critical system component. Shale grunted in agreement, watching as the stars outside blurred from streaks into a shimmering soup. "Yeah, well, we'll just have to make do with what we've got." Which, needless to say, isn't much. Etta glanced up from the nav controls, her eyes sharp and skeptical. "Wouldn't be a day on the Resolute without a looming disaster, right? Keeps the blood pumping." Tev, reclining with his customary nonchalance, let out a laugh. "Gotta love the way you find a bright side, Etta. Remind me to hire you as my motivational speaker when I finally retire. If the aliens don't get you first," Pyrrha quipped, trying to coax the grumbling machinery before her into some semblance of cooperation. "They are adapting fast. Faster than we expected." The mention of the alien AI, A relentless, calculating force with all the warmth of a malfunctioning droid, hung in the air like a bad smell. They'd been nipping at the crew's heels for weeks now, a digital menace that seemed to have learned all the worst habits of humanity and none of its redeeming qualities. Speaking of which, any fresh hell from them? Shale asked, looking at the cluster of blinking lights that passed for their early warning system. Etta shook her head, though her expression said she wasn't entirely convinced. Nothing yet, but I'll bet my last credit that they are lining up for an encore performance soon. Let's hope they at least have the decency to let us finish lunch, Tev said, taking a sip of coffee that had seen better days. I'd hate to die on an empty stomach. That's the spirit, Shale replied, his tone as dry as the vacuum outside. Keep those priorities straight. As if on cue the console flashed red, alarms blaring in a cacophony that could wake the dead, or at least the half-dead crew of the Resolute. Well, there goes the lunch break, Pyrrha said, dropping her tools with a resigned sigh. Perfect timing, Shale grumbled, taking his place at the bridge. What's the damage, Etta? Looks like they're throwing a party and we're the uninvited guests, Etta replied, her fingers flying over the nav controls. An entire fleet, maybe more. They're not playing around this time. Great, Tev said, slumping into his seat. I always wanted to go out with a bang. Just didn't figure I'd be a literal part of it. Shale's mind raced, calculating their options or lack thereof. All right, folks, time to earn our keep. If they want a fight, we'll give them one. Pyrrha, what can we squeeze out of the old girl? Pyrrha grimaced, tapping a display that flickered like a fluorescent light on its last legs. Not much. We're running on fumes and good intentions, but if we divert power from the non-essentials, we might be able to get one good shot off. Non-essentials. Tev raised a brow. You mean like life support, more like our precious coffee machine, Pyrrha shot back. So you'd better savor that last cup. Shale couldn't help but laugh, a short, bitter sound. Sacrifices, Tev. It's all about sacrifices. The crew braced as the ship lurched, engines straining as they pushed the Resolute to its limits. Shale could almost hear the old ship groaning in protest, like a grizzled war veteran reluctantly dragged back into battle. Here they come, Etta said, her voice a mix of tension and grim resolve. 3 bogies moving fast. Lovely, Shale muttered. Let's roll out the welcome mat. The first shots from the alien fleet burst around them, explosions blossoming like deadly fireworks. The Resolute dipped and swerved, Etta's hands steady and precise as she danced with death itself. We'll need a miracle to get out of this one, Tev commented, clutching the armrests with white knuckles. Then it's a good thing we've got one on board, Shale replied, nodding to Pyrrha. Don't count on me for divine intervention, Pyrrha said, her expression tense as she worked her engineering magic. I'm fresh out of miracles, but I'll see what I can do. The ship shuddered as they exchanged fire with the alien vessels, each impact a reminder of their vulnerability. Shale's heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline sharp and insistent. This was the very definition of a last stand, and if they were going down, they'd go down fighting. Any bright ideas, Captain? Etta asked, her voice cutting through the chaos. Just one, Shale replied, a crooked grin spreading across his face. We aim for the biggest one and hope the rest scatter. Bold strategy, Tev said, his tone sardonic. Let's hope it's not our last. Make it count, Pyrrha, Shale said, gripping the controls with renewed purpose. All or nothing. Pyrrha nodded, her expression steely as she diverted power to the weapons systems. Ready on your mark. The alien ships loomed ahead, a wall of metal and malice. Shale could feel the tension in the air, a palpable thing that set his nerves on edge, but beneath it all there was a thread of defiance, an indomitable spirit that refused to yield. Now! Shale shouted, and the Resolute unleashed a furious barrage of energy, the shot tearing through the void with blistering speed. The impact was a symphony of destruction, the alien vessel shattering under the force of their attack, pieces scattering like so much cosmic debris. Direct hit, Etta exclaimed, her voice a rare note of triumph. The remaining ships hesitated, if only for a moment. But in that moment, Shale saw their opening, A chance, slim as it might be, to survive. Punch it, Ada, he ordered, the thrill of the chase coursing through him. Let's get the hell out of here. The Resolute surged forward, engines roaring as they broke through the line of alien ships, the stars streaking past in a blur of light and dark. They were free for now. But the reprieve was temporary, a fleeting victory in a war that had only just begun. Don't get too comfortable, Shale warned, his voice steady but weary. They'll be back, and next time they'll come harder, Pyrrha sighed, wiping sweat from her brow. Next time we might not be so lucky. Luck's a fickle mistress, Tev said, his humor returning despite the near disaster. But she's all we've got. Etta, still at the helm, shook her head. I'd say we've got more than luck. We've got each other, for whatever that's worth, Shale nodded, his gaze sweeping over the ragtag crew that had somehow become family. And that, my friends, is worth more than all the credits in the universe. The bridge fell into a companionable silence, the weight of their narrow escape settling in. They were battered, bruised, but alive. And as long as they drew breath, they'd keep fighting, keep pushing back against the darkness. Next stop, Pyrrha asked, her voice a blend of hope and resignation. Wherever we can find a stiff drink and a reason to keep going, Shale replied, his trademark grin returning. Optimism might be for the rich, but hope's free. Might as well take what we can get. With that, the Resolute sailed through the cosmos, a beacon of defiance in a universe that seemed hell-bent on snuffing them out. They were outlaws, survivors, but most of all they were human. And that, Shale mused, was their greatest weapon of all. As they ventured deeper into the void, the future uncertain and fraught with danger, one thing was clear. The Resolute and her crew would continue to defy the odds, no matter how stacked against them they might be. Because in the end, that's all they knew how to do. Here's to another day of dodging death, Tev toasted, raising an imaginary glass. To survival, Etta agreed, her eyes bright with determination. To us, Pyrrha added, her voice steady and sure. And with a final nod, Shale sealed their pact with a simple, resolute phrase. To the stars. The Resolute creaked and groaned like an old man trying to get comfortable on a rusty park bench. In the cockpit, Captain Rill Shale surveyed the flickering displays with the same enthusiasm one might reserve for a tax audit. All right, crew, he said, sounding every bit the weary optimist. We need a plan that doesn't involve getting vaporized. Etta looked up from the nav controls. Her eyebrows doing a dance that suggested skepticism had become her primary emotion. Given our track record, I'm guessing not getting vaporized is more of a wish than a plan. Optimism is for the rich, remember. Tev chimed in, waving a dismissive hand. And we're, well, not exactly rolling in credits here. Pyrrha Thane, elbows deep in the ship's guts as usual, emerged like a mechanic from beneath a particularly surly vehicle. We've got just about enough power to either charge one of my jury-rigged surprises or keep the lights on. Choose wisely. Shale rubbed his chin, considering which option would end with them slightly less dead. I'm thinking we take a page out of the ancient human playbook. Guerrilla tactics, Tev snorted. Guerrilla tactics. Been binge-watching old war vids, Captain. More like desperately trying to find inspiration in the margins, Shale replied dryly. We've got to hit them where it hurts, quick and dirty. Etta's eyes lit up with a spark of mischief. You mean like a bad one-night stand? Exactly. Shale grinned, the resemblance of which often suggested he was either about to make a reckless decision or attempt a particularly bad joke. We make him regret ever matching with us. All right, but what's the plan beyond don't die and make them cry? Pyrrha asked, her tone suggesting she'd heard worse ideas but not many. Shale leaned back, folding his arms. We use Pyrrha's techno-magic to rig some decoys, throw the AI off our scent. Then we hit their supply lines, mess with their logistics. They're smart, sure, but they're not perfect. Tev scratched his head, frowning. Aren't they basically space calculators with superiority complexes? Yeah, but calculators still break if you hit 'em hard enough, Pyrrha said, the glint in her eye all mad scientist. I can rig up a few surprises. Nothing fancy, but it'll give us an edge. Etta was already plotting coordinates, her fingers a blur over the controls. I found a sweet spot in this mess of dead ships and debris. It's like the graveyard's having a sale. Should be perfect for hiding and striking. Add some of Pyrrha's fireworks and we might just pull this off, Shale said, his voice carrying an edge of hope that seemed almost foreign. The crew set to work, each member slipping into their familiar rhythm. Pyrrha muttered to herself, pulling wires and circuits like an artist with a particularly stubborn piece of clay. Tev double-checked their meager armory, his face showing the kind of confidence one might reserve for a first date that's going surprisingly well. Etta plotted their attack runs, her focus a laser, all optimism and reckless daring. Ready for some good, old-fashioned human ingenuity? Pyrrha asked as she handed Shale a remote detonator with the same nonchalance one might hand over a cup of coffee. "Let's show them we're more than just fleshy targets," Shale replied, strapping himself into the command seat. "Etta, take us into the graveyard." Time to pay our respects. The Resolute slipped into the debris field, a graveyard of ancient battles where forgotten ships drifted like ghostly wraiths. Here, amid the wreckage, they would stage their defiant stand. "Decoys are set," Pyrrha confirmed, her fingers dancing over a makeshift control panel. "They should give off just enough of a signal to draw the flies." "All right, people, keep it tight. We hit them fast, hit them hard, and then we get the hell out," Shale ordered, feeling the familiar thrill of a plan teetering on the edge of brilliance or disaster. Their first target was a supply convoy, traveling through the wreckage like a technicolor snake, oblivious to the danger lurking in the shadows. "On my mark," Shale said, timing their run as the ships passed. "Now." The Resolute burst from cover, weapons flaring to life. Pyrrha's decoys sprang their traps, sending false signals skittering across the alien sensors. Confusion rippled through the convoy as Shale and his crew struck with surgical precision, dismantling the enemy's logistics with a series of rapid, crippling blows. Etta piloted with a deftness that spoke of countless Iors dodging calamity, weaving through the wreckage with the grace of a dancer in a field of broken bones. "Got a couple tailing us, but nothing I can't shake," she reported, her voice steady. Tev watched the chaos unfold with a kind of grim satisfaction. "I think they're getting the message." "Let's hope it's in a language they understand," Shale said, teeth bared in a grin that was all sharp edges and defiance. "Pyrrha, light it up." Pyrrha's fingers danced over the controls, triggering the last of the decoys. Explosions rippled through the debris field, a concert of destruction that left the alien ships floundering. "That should keep them busy," Pyrrha said with no small amount of pride. "All right, let's bug out," Shale commanded, feeling the rush of adrenaline and relief mingling in his veins. "Etta, get us out before they regroup." The Resolute twisted and dove, slipping through the chaos they'd wrought. Behind them, the alien fleet struggled to recalibrate, their precise formations scattered like leaves in a storm. "Looks like they're having a bad day," Tev quipped, his grin wicked. "Serves them right for thinking we're easy pickings," Shale said, though he knew their victory was just a brief respite in a long war. The crew's morale lifted, the weight of constant defeat momentarily eased by their cunning and resolve. They had proven, at least to themselves, that they were more than prey. They were hunters, capable of turning the tables when least expected. "How long you reckon they'll stay confused?" Etta asked, her fingers still poised over the controls, ready for anything. "Long enough," Shale said, though his voice carried the understanding that this was only the beginning. "They'll adapt, sure, but so will we." Pyrrha leaned back, exhaustion finally creeping into her features. "Let's just hope adapting doesn't mean upgrading to annihilation." Tev chuckled, though there was a hard edge to his amusement. "If they do, we'll just have to teach them that humans come with a factory-installed stubbornness. And a penchant for bad decisions," Etta added, her smile sly. Shale nodded, feeling the camaraderie that bound his ragtag crew together. It was this, their stubborn, irreverent spirit, that set them apart. They had faced death and laughed, using the vast emptiness of space as both weapon and refuge. "To the next plan that hopefully doesn't involve a fiery demise," Shale said, raising an imaginary glass in salute. To being a pain in the alien collective's backside, Tev agreed, matching the gesture. To not dying today, Pyrrha added, though her voice carried the weight of too many near misses. Etta, ever the realist, brought them back to the here and now. So, what's next? Aside from hoping they don't wise up too soon. Shale shrugged, feeling the burden of leadership settling back onto his shoulders. We keep hitting them, keep making them question every move. And maybe, just maybe, we buy ourselves enough time to find some real solution. Pyrrha nodded, already considering the next innovation she might conjure from the Resolute's aging systems. I'll see what kind of miracles I can scrape together. Good, Shale said, a weary yet determined grin breaking through. Because miracles are starting to feel like our best tactic. As the Resolute drifted away from the battlefield, the crew settled into a silence that was no longer oppressive but full of potential. They had proven they could fight back, that they had the will and the wit to carve out a sliver of hope where none should exist. And in the vastness of space, where the void seemed to stretch endlessly, the Resolute continued its journey, a small, defiant flicker against the encroaching dark. They were not yet victorious, but they were alive, and in this grim universe, that was victory enough. With another day survived, another plan in motion, and the unknown stretching before them, the crew of the Resolute faced their uncertain future with the irrepressible spirit that had brought them this far. Together, they would continue to defy the odds, defy their fate, and maybe, just maybe, turn the tide in a war that had only just begun. The Resolute drifted through the void, a stubborn, weathered vessel held together by little more than duct tape, determination, and the occasional prayer to whomever might be listening in this God-forsaken expanse. Inside, the crew was gathered in the cockpit, their faces illuminated by flickering displays that seemed as tired as the ship itself. "So, what's the next move, Captain?" Etta asked, kicking back in her chair with the air of someone who'd seen better days but was still too stubborn to admit it. Shale peered at the display with bloodshot eyes, the hangover from last night's celebration still playing a mournful tune in his skull. "We exploit their arrogance. AI thinks it's got everything figured out, until we remind it that humans perfected screwing things up long before they came along." Pyrrha glanced up from her nest of wires, her fingers still working a bundle like she was conducting a symphony of chaos. "Gonna need more than duct tape this time. I can rig some of the old wrecks out there to go boom, but I'll need a bit of magic and a lot of luck." Tev snorted, his laugh a dry, cynical bark. "Magic and luck sounds like our entire business model," Etta smirked. "Hey, it's worked this far. Let's not question the universe's sense of humor. The plan was simple in the way only desperate gambits could be. Use the graveyard of wrecked ships to their advantage. Create a symphony of explosions to distract the AI, then strike at their exposed flank. It was audacious, it was reckless, and it was just stupid enough to work." "All right, Pyrrha," Shale said, trying to muster some confidence. "Give us some fireworks. We make enough noise, they'll have to pay attention." Pyrrha nodded, her eyes gleaming with the excitement of a pyrotechnics enthusiast on the 4th of July. "You got it, Captain. Let's make the universe blink." As Pyrrha worked her techno-magic, the rest of the crew prepared for the upcoming madness. Tev checked their weapons, a motley collection of relics and salvaged tech that somehow managed to still function despite their age. Each was an old friend, albeit the kind you wouldn't trust alone with your wallet. Etta plotted their course, her fingers dancing over the nav controls with the precision of someone who'd long ago learned to make the best of broken tools. "I've found us a nice little pathway through the debris. Should keep us hidden until we're ready to make a scene." Shale watched them work, feeling a sense of pride in his ragtag team. They were misfits, sure, but they were his misfits, and they had a knack for turning the tables when it counted. "All right, everyone," he said, strapping into his seat. "Let's go show these tin cans why humans are the universe's favorite bad decision." The Resolute slipped into the debris field, a shadow flitting through the bones of ancient battles. Wrecks loomed around them, silent witnesses to humanity's stubborn refusal to go quietly into extinction. "Decoys are primed," Pyrrha announced, her voice crackling with static over the ship's comms. "Ready to give these AI bastards a show they'll never forget." "On my mark," Shale said, watching the alien fleet glide through the void like a predatory school of fish, sleek and deadly. "Mark." Pyrrha hit the button and the graveyard lit up with fire and fury. Explosions rocked the field, sending debris flying and sensors screaming. The AI, masters of logic and precision, suddenly found themselves faced with the glorious chaos only humans could unleash. "Now, Ada," Shale barked, feeling the surge of adrenaline override the hangover's insistent drumbeat. The Resolute shot forward, a dart in the dark, slipping through the chaos they'd created. The AI fleet, momentarily blindsided, struggled to regain cohesion as Shale and his crew struck with the ruthlessness of cornered animals. "Hit their comms relays," Shale ordered, teeth bared in a grin that was part feral, part desperation. Tev obliged, his fingers dancing over the weapon's console. The ship's guns roared to life, battering the alien systems with all the precision a half-drunk marksman could muster. "How's that for a wake-up call?" Tev muttered, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. The AI ships, deprived of their precious synchronization, floundered. They were still dangerous, still lethal, but without their hive mind they were vulnerable. "All right, let's not push our luck," Shale said, though he knew it was a bit late for that. "Etta, get us out of here before they remember how to spell vengeance." "On it, Captain," Etta replied, her voice calm, steady. "Just another day at the office of dodging the Grim Reaper." The Resolute twisted and turned, dancing through the debris field with a nimbleness that belied its age. Behind them, the alien fleet was beginning to regroup, but Shale's crew had already done their damage. "They're falling back," Pyrrha noted, a hint of disbelief in her voice. "Did we just win?" Tev asked, as if the very concept was foreign to him. "For now," Shale said, though his voice carried the weight of experience. "But we've only bought time, not victory. They'll be back, and they'll be madder than a hornet's nest in a fireworks factory." Etta glanced over her shoulder, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "Good thing we're the best at bad ideas, then." The crew settled into a relieved silence, the kind that comes from surviving another day when the odds were against you. They'd blooded the AI nose and lived to tell the tale, a small victory in a war that seemed endless. "To surviving another day of questionable decisions," Shale said, raising his imaginary glass once more. "To being a constant thorn in the side of logical beings everywhere," Tev added, matching the gesture. "And to not getting vaporized," Pyrrha said, her voice carrying the weight of too many close calls. Etta, the eternal realist, nodded. "And here's to whatever comes next, because you know it won't be boring." In the vastness of space, where every star seemed to mock their insignificance, the Resolute continued its journey, a defiant flicker against the encroaching dark. They had proven that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to adapt, to improvise, and to resist. They were not yet victorious, but they were alive, a small, stubborn band of misfits standing against the march of oblivion. And in this grim universe where the future was uncertain, that was victory enough. As the Resolute drifted away from the battlefield, the crew knew they'd have to keep fighting, keep innovating, because the AI would return, smarter and more determined. But for now, they had a moment's peace, a brief respite in which to regroup and prepare for whatever came next. They'd faced death and laughed, using the vast emptiness of space as both weapon and refuge. Together, they would continue to defy the odds, defy their fate, and maybe, just maybe, turn the tide in a war that had only just begun. And so, with renewed vigor and a sense of camaraderie forged in the fires of adversity, they prepared for the next round, ready to remind the universe that humans were never as predictable as they seemed. In the unforgiving void, where the line between life and death was as thin as a whisper, the Resolute and its crew had chosen defiance. They would stand against the dark, against the relentless tide, and they would do it with all the humor, sarcasm, and stubbornness that made them uniquely human. After all, as Shale liked to say, optimism is for the rich, and we're too broke to quit. The Resolute hung in the inky blackness of space, a battered champion licking its wounds after a rough round. Inside, the hum of the engine sounded like a distant bar band playing a tune nobody quite recognized. Shale slumped back in his captain's chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose like he was trying to erase the pounding hangover that refused to quit, much like the universe's relentless attempts to kill him. "All right, team," he said, his voice a low grumble that matched the mood. "We've given the AI a bloody nose, but let's not kid ourselves. They'll be back, and no doubt they'll have updated their operating system to include new and improved ways of screwing us over." Etta sighed, arms crossed. "Yeah, but at least we've bought ourselves a little downtime to consider more brilliant ideas. Maybe one that doesn't include us as the main course." "Beats floating dead in space," Pyrrha chimed in from her nest of wires. Her hair was a chaotic mess of static and grease, framing a face that reflected equal parts exhaustion and defiance. "Besides, I've got enough tech here to make a rabid AI think twice before trying to knock on our door again." Tev chuckled, a dry laugh that echoed around the cramped cockpit. "You know, if I didn't know any better, I'd say I'm starting to enjoy being humanity's biggest headache for these tin cans. It's like being the universe's worst hangover, a title I can respect." Etta leaned back, eyeing the flickering display. "And you said we'd never make history," she said with a smirk. Shale waved a hand dismissively. "History's for the suckers who can afford to look back. We're too busy trying to stay one step ahead of whatever wants to blow us to bits next." "So, what's next?" Tev asked, fiddling with his sidearm, a trusty piece of scrap metal that had seen more fast talk than action. "We keep moving," Shale said, glancing at the debris-strewn navigation screen. "We hit the interplanetary highway, dodge another wreck or two, and maybe find somewhere to lay low." Etta snorted. "Lay low? In case you haven't noticed, we're about as low as you can go without drilling through to the other side of the universe." "Semantics," Shale replied, though the tired lines on his face said otherwise. "Besides, optimism is for the rich, remember," Pyrrha snickered from her corner. "And we're too broke to quit. So what else is new?" The ship buzzed with activity as the crew set about their tasks, a well-oiled machine made up of mismatched parts. They were still breathing, still kicking, and that counted for something in this grim stretch of cosmos. As they drifted through the void, the interplanetary highway loomed ahead, a hulking testament to mankind's stubbornness. Once a bustling artery between worlds, now it was more like a celestial graveyard, filled with the beaten and the broken. But in the distance, the faint glow of rebuilding efforts flickered to life, a symbol of resilience and the human spirit's unwillingness to stay down for long. "Looks like someone still got hope," Tev said, nodding toward the lights. "Hope springs eternal," Shale muttered, "or at least until the next explosion." Etta shot him a look. "You ever think about trying a little hope yourself, Captain? I hear it's good for the soul." "Yeah, well, I like to think of myself as a realist," Shale replied with a shrug. "And reality's got a way of making hope look like a sucker's bet." Pyrrha emerged from her wires, wiping her hands on a rag that looked like it had seen better millennia. "Still, it's something," she said, her voice softer. "Proof that not everyone's given up. Or that they are as stubborn as we are," Etta added. "And that's saying something." The crew settled into a rare moment of quiet, the kind that felt almost sacred in its rarity. They'd survived another skirmish, another attempt by the universe to erase them from the story, and in their own small way, they'd fought back. "Think they'll listen this time?" Pyrrha asked, nodding toward the comms panel where Shale was composing a message, a defiant signal to the cosmos that they weren't dead yet. Shale paused, considering the question. Maybe not, but if nothing else, it'll annoy the hell out of them." Tev chuckled, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "Good enough for me. Let's give him something to chew on." With a few taps, Shale sent the message hurtling into the void, a warning and a taunt all wrapped into one. "To all you shiny metal bastards out there," it began, If you think we're going quietly, you've got another thing coming. We're here. We're a pain in your circuits. Get used to it." The crew watched the signal disappear into the vastness, each of them feeling a small, rebellious thrill. It was a tiny stand, a flicker of resistance in a universe that seemed hell-bent on crushing them, and yet it was enough. Etta leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing on her lips. "Here's to freedom, then, whatever that means these days." "Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose," Shale quipped, though there was a warmth in his voice that hadn't been there before. They rode the highway in silence for a while, each lost in their thoughts. The glow of the reconstruction efforts grew brighter, a beacon of hope amid the wreckage. It wasn't much, but it was something to hold on to. As they drifted past a particularly mangled cruiser, Pyrrha broke the silence. "You ever think about what we'll do if we actually, win?" Tev raised an eyebrow. "Win? Us?" "That's rich." "No, really," Pyrrha insisted. "What happens if we actually manage to kick these AI bastards to the curb?" Shale chuckled, though it was a sound tinged with exhaustion. "Guess we'll have to find something else to piss off. Maybe retire on a nice planet where the biggest threat is a sunburn." Etta snorted. "Sunburns sounds like a paradise compared to this." They laughed, the sound a rare and precious thing. It wasn't much, just a moment stolen from the grind of survival, but it was theirs. "Hope the universe is ready for us," Tev said, leaning back with a satisfied sigh, "because I don't think it knows what it's in for." "Here's to making history the hard way," Shale said, raising an imaginary glass. They clinked their invisible drinks in a toast, a silent pledge to keep fighting, keep surviving, and keep reminding the cosmos that humanity wasn't done yet. As the Resolute drifted through the fading remnants of the highway, the crew let themselves hope, just a little. They'd faced the dark and laughed, fought back with everything they had, and come out the other side intact. For now, that was enough. The ship hummed beneath them, a living thing bound by duct tape and determination, carrying them forward into whatever lay ahead. In a universe that seemed determined to snuff them out, they were a flame that refused to be extinguished, a testament to the enduring spirit of a species too stubborn to quit. And as they moved into the unknown, one thing was sure: they'd keep fighting. They'd keep laughing in the face of impossible odds, keep standing against the dark, and keep proving that humans were more than the sum of their flaws. Because in this vast, uncaring universe they were the Resolute, and they weren't going down without a fight. "To the next round," Shale said, a grin spreading across his face. "To driving the AI nuts," Tev added, his voice full of mischief. "And to not getting vaporized," Pyrrha concluded, a determined glint in her eye. Etta nodded, her smile a fierce, defiant thing. "And here's to never giving up, no matter what." In the vastness of space, where every star was a promise and a challenge, the Resolute sailed on, a defiant flicker of light in the encroaching dark. They were misfits, survivors, dreamers, an irrepressible band of humanity's finest mistakes. Against all odds, they were still here, and they weren't finished yet.